Larry the GM, and we will be hitting you up with a couple of things this afternoon. But before we get into lineups later, I wanted to address something because I know there's a lot of folks going around on Twitter, Facebook, upset that Dusty Baker pinch hit for Chas McCormick with Jon Singleton last night. And I understand the frustrations of fans not understanding what Dusty's doing, frustrations with his explanations. So I am going to try to do what should be impossible and explain the Astros move better than they explained it themselves last night. All right, so guys, that's my task. Um, and this is one of those bizarro moments for those that follow the Larry the GM Twitter feed or the website or anything where I am going to defend Dusty Baker. So, like for all the people out there that want to say, Larry, you're nothing but complaining and you're negative, let this be the moment. You hear me that I am defending Dusty Baker. All right, so let's go. Let's start with the lineup. That we had yesterday. And I'm sorry guys, I took a day off from putting out the lineups to watch my Longhorns play, and that they did. They did very well. Unlike some other teams in the Big 12. This was the lineup that the Astros had, and a 352 expected WOBA for that lineup, which is pretty good. It's not bad. It's not great. It's not as good as some of the lineups we can get versus a lefty pitcher, but that's a pretty good lineup. 5.7 expected runs. There's a lot of negativity about Mauricio Dubon leading off yesterday, and his expected WOBA versus Severino was a 287, which is not great. It's 30 points below, 30, yeah, about 30 points below league average. But the rest of the lineup, I mean, there's a lot of red in this lineup, and Abreu appears to be a very different batter than he's been all season versus the slider, especially, which makes this number right here significantly better. So that lineup was really good. And the other thing that people were frustrated about is like, well, why is Chas McCormick down here batting eighth? Well, you can see he was never going to bat anywhere between 2 and 7. He was not a better option to bat. Now you may not like that, but I'm going to ask you within the context of this article to trust me. Teams are looking at similar. If they're not using xWOBA data, they're using something very similar. And the xWOBA calculation for Chas McCormick yesterday versus the pitch mix that Severino pitched would not have put him at the top in the core of that lineup yesterday. Now, one might argue that he could have been the leadoff hitter, and that's very probable. I will say he probably would have just seen some pitches he's not been great at, changeups, cutters, and sinkers, and more about the sinker as we get into this discussion today. So let's talk about like what happened. What did Dusty Baker? Why did Dusty Baker pinch hit for Chas McCormick in the ninth inning with 2 outs, one person with Yonder Diaz standing at first base and actually getting pinch run with Myers. So they had one of their fastest players on first base trying to score on a double, I'm sure. So you see what Dusty said, and I'm gonna go deeper into it. But he said basically their projections show Jon Singleton projected to hit 275 off of Clay Holmes. Chas McCormick was projected to hit 220. That's basically what their statistics were against the slider or from a right-handed pitcher, and that's why we have Singleton here for these situations like this. Basically, he's saying, hey, the numbers he had, Chas McCormick was a better option. Well, I'm going to show you why that's really true, and actually in a much more compelling way than just those two statements. So I would say Dusty Baker's explanation is a little bit of the problem. I don't know that he's real comfortable with some of this data. I want folks to understand there's going to be three things I'm going to ask for folks to do as we engage this data. I want folks to just accept the fact that teams are looking at expected stats, which build off of the quality of contact, the exit velocity, the launch angle, some other factors in there to calculate something like an XWOBA or an XBA or an X slug. This data is the kind of data that the teams are using to understand like what's really the best matchup here. They're not just using tiny or small sample sizes of actual data because that actual data is as shown by Babbitt has a lot of noise in it and you have to be very careful. You're actually better off looking at should this contact resulted in a hit, should this contact have resulted in a home run, than you are with did it actually result in a hit or a home run? Did somebody make a spectacular play defensively? When you're talking about what's going to happen next, you need to consider what the projection type data has to say. So this is why metrics that use precursor data like exit velocity are more predictive of future results. So I don't believe personally that Dusty Baker's too comfortable with most of this data, but I believe he's got people around him. Of course, the Astros, and I don't even remember his name, but the Astros have a strategy coach that I would think he's all deep down in this data. I think Joe Espada is very comfortable with this kind of data. Um, and so I think he entrusts those guys to explain to him, hey, this is what the data, our matchup data says is the best option here, and he may say, okay, that rings true with me, and well, let's go do it. And that I think that's essentially what happened in the ninth inning. Well, let me walk you through the situation and I'll show you why the matchup data actually would have gone down this path to tell Dusty Baker and the Astros analytics group and the Astros strategy coach why it was the best move. All right, so Clay Holmes is pitching. He's gotten 2 outs. Yainer Diaz gets a really soft contact infield hit, barely gets on first base, um, and then we're pinch running with Jake Myers. So Clay Holmes is either going to face Chas McCormick or a pinch hitter, and the most likely pinch hitter is going to be Singleton, and I'll show you why in a minute. So what pitches does Clay Holmes throw? Well, versus righties, he's throwing 63% sinkers, 22% sliders, and 15% sleepers. Versus lefties, he's only throwing 2 pitches. He's either throwing a sinker or a slider, and he's throwing the sinker 75% of the time. So, and you can see the data there. It's actually versus the sinker, that sinker versus the right-handed hitters, those batters actually are doing better. That's why this is blue from a pitcher standpoint. That's not that good of a expected WOBA data. Expected average WOBA is 319. So if you're throwing a pitch that's getting a 354, that's kind of a meatball type pitch. But yet Clay Holmes has been throwing it over and over and over. In fact, if you look at this data down here, this is what he's done in the month of August and the first couple of days of September. And you see that if you compare those two sets of numbers, the numbers in August and September are even better, and that's much closer to average. And he's been pretty deadly with these other pitches, but he doesn't throw them very much. In fact, his reliance on the sinker has gone up in August and early September to the point where he's throwing that sinker nearly 77% of the time across all batters. So, in fact, when we look through the lineup, well, let me pause here 1 minute with the narrative of what's happening in the game. Let's look at Chas McCormick, and Chas McCormick has been incredible in 2023. Great job. Okay, one of the Astros arguably 3 to 4 most productive hitters. Chas McCormick does have some pitches that he is below average and in some cases far below average. Chas McCormick absolutely destroys four seam fastballs. I don't know why any team would ever throw Chas McCormick a four-seam fastball, either a lefty or a righty. You see the numbers here, and you see how dark red that is. Chas McCormick is destroying four-seam fastballs in 2023. Chas McCormick has not done that well against changeups from righties and cutters from righties, sweepers from righty, and sinkers from righty. Now, if you remember, I just told you Clay Holmes, 77% sinker ball, and I just told you that Chas McCormick, with his 255 expected WOBA versus a right-handed pitcher, is not very good against that sinker ball. Now you are in the loop of understanding what's happening in this decision to send either Chas McCormick or Jon Singleton up. So Chas McCormick with these numbers versus that sinker, you see him down here, 253 versus a slide. This is what this would look like versus the pitches that Clay Holmes actually throws. And you can see it's if he can get Clay Holmes to throw him a slider, that would be good. But Clay Holmes actually has a nasty slider. Then in the month of August, nobody is hit. So I don't know why he's not throwing that slider more, but he's not. So here we are. So we accept the fact that McCormick is a challenging matchup versus Clay Holmes. Then you say, okay, well, what are my options? This is the table sorted on xWOBA from a right-handed pitch. No, actually, this is all sinker ball hit Astros versus sinker balls in 2023 as an Astro. So Jon Singleton's, these are his numbers as an Astro. Now his numbers versus Milwaukee are not as good, but I want you to understand this is what they have seen through their coaching with Jon Singleton versus him versus a sinker ball. He's the second best option on this table versus a sinker ball. And that is you see Chas McCormick's the third worst option on this list versus that sinker ball. If you accept the fact it's going to be a sinker, who would you rather send to the plate? Jon Singleton or Chas McCormick? That's where we're coming to with this decision. So here we go. You got Jon Singleton. What has he done? Well, during this for the whole year, his numbers versus sinkers 320. That's not bad. That's basically average. That's far better than Chas McCormick's numbers versus a right-handed. This is a right-handed pitching, a sinker from a right-handed pitcher. You see these numbers, 320. As an Astro, that's that 464 we just showed you in that table above. Now again, if Clay Holmes is going to throw a slider versus Singleton, I am shocked in the 5 pitches he saw, not a single slider. Clay Holmes is just locked on that sinker right now, and he's riding it because he's feeling confident with it. So before Singleton, Holmes had thrown 15 pitches to the Astros last night. 14 of them were sinkers. They knew it was going to be a home sinker versus either McCormick or Singleton. So which of these two players do you want up there? Again, from an Astros batting standpoint, blue is bad. Well, so in here in this table, this blue being bad is bad for the pitcher, and 301 is better for the pitcher. These numbers, blue is bad for the batter, and red is good for the batter. You can see that we're talking about a projected projected xWOBA of 289 for McCormick going up there against that slider versus Clay Holmes slider, or 447. I calculated a couple different ways. You can see two different projections for that. So either it's an 80-point gap or it's even more than that, 160-point gap on xWOBA. Now you may not like Larry. I don't understand the scale xWOBA. You're telling me 318 is average. What does this mean? Well, let's contextualize this and I did a regression of data of ex-WOBA data or WOBA data versus OPS. So if you contextualize the WOBA number here we're talking about to an OPS number, it's either you're sending a player up to the plate in Chas McCormick that it would be expected to bat 653 versus OPS versus that pitch that pitch from Clay Holmes, that sinker, or you expect Singleton to hit that sinker at an OPS of 1043. That's nearly 400 OPS points difference. That is why you have Chas McCormick sitting and Jon Singleton going to the plate. Now, either you believe in this data or you don't. I can't help you if you don't. But I'm telling you, this is the kind of data. Dusty's quoting some of the precursors of this data. I'm telling you, behind that, there's a whole lot more than this is a sprinkling of what the data that the analytical group had put together for the situation versus Clay Holmes, even before this series even started. The answer here is that in the ninth inning, when there's two outs, when we got one batter game on the line, you want Jon Singleton in that spot because he's literally got this huge of a gap versus Chas McCormick in that same spot versus the righty. Now, if it's versus a lefty, everything is out. The story changes. But that's the situation we had last night. So, folks, I know it's easy to question everything Dusty does. Like, there's poor explanations for why things are happening. You have. I mean, I understand somebody has the little understanding or little belief in what's happening, but what I'll say is like, look, this is why you have me. All right. So let's, before you finish the video, please like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Larry the GM website, join the Patreon group and support so you can get more of this kind of work. But this is why you have me, to help you folks in this fan base understand why things happen. Right. And when I can't explain it, then I'm gonna rail, and I'll lead the railing of our upset fans of what we're doing. But what Dusty did last night was not dumb in the ninth inning. It's one of the smarter things he's actually done in a pinch hit situation, right? They took advantage. They basically, it doesn't, things don't always work in baseball. Even when you do the right thing, it doesn't always work out. Okay. They wanted Jon Singleton to face the sinker. He faced five sinkers and he still struck out. That's baseball. All right, guys. Thank you for joining in. Watch the video. Please like the video and do all the other things I said. And thank you for your support of the Larry the GM website. Talk to you later, and I'll be back later on with the September 3rd lineup analysis a little bit later. Thanks, guys.